Welcome to the Potrero Yard Modernization Project public meeting for the 50% schematic design. We're here presenting virtually through a virtual public meeting and are really excited to have you all attending and to hear about the project, as well as to hear, provide your feedback, input, ideas, and questions that you may have. So now we'll get into the meeting, what you all have joined here today for. If you could go to the next slide, we can go over the agenda. We'll provide a brief project history and get into a little bit of an overview of the project, and then dive even deeper into the two main components of the project, the bus yard and the housing and commercial aspects of the project. We'll spend some time walking through the architecture and design, as well as public art opportunities and processes. After we finish through the presentation, again, we'll have time for questions and answers. All right, great. Project history. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, John Angelico.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, hi, everybody. My name is John Angelico, and I'm a public information officer with the MTA working on this project, the Potrero Yard Modernization Project. And I'd like to just briefly mention a little bit of the history of Potrero Yard. You may have seen it. It's been here for 108 years, and it started life in 1915 to serve 100 streetcars. That's what the top picture on your right is showing you, the early incarnation of the yard. After World War II, it became a dedicated trolley bus yard, and that's, you can see, whoops, I guess we went ahead. There we go. That middle picture shows you what it looks like, or what it looked like in the late 1940s from the 17th Street side when the trolley buses took over, and the site became its current size of 4.4 acres. It was originally designed to hold 138 coaches, but today, it typically holds more than 150 and what we call crush capacity. There's a lot of buses there, way too many really for efficiency's sake. And in 2017, and MTA looked at Potrero Yard as the first and best candidate to undergo modernization to bring it into the future and make this yard one of the yards that we would like to use to bring our agency, the SFMTA, into the future, to continue being one of the greenest fleets in the nation. And it was part of a $2 billion capital program known as Building Progress. So it's a systematic improvement program that we're undergoing at the MTA, and Potrero Yard is the first candidate, the first such site that we're doing under this program. Down here in the lower left, you can see a quick statistic showing you that back in the pre-COVID days, 102,000 people boarded buses that came out of Potrero Yard. It's about 14% of the Muni ridership. And by the way, the lines that are served at the yard include the 5, the 5R, the 6, 14, the 22, the 30, and the 49, really popular lines. Next slide, please. So why are we building this yard? What do we need to get out of it? Why are we doing what we're going to do? There's 4 big things that we're trying to address here. We want to make the yard more efficient. If you've seen the yard, you know it's charming and everything, but there's a lot of inefficiencies and a lot of delays and built into the construction because it's just old and obsolete. So we need to make this more efficient and improve the service level that we can perform at the yard. We want to make this yard more sustainable. Oops, I think we can, there we go. So we want to make the yard more sustainable, or better able to bring our agency into the future in a more sustainable way. Public transit is one of the best tools we have to fight climate change, to address climate change. So when we make this yard more sustainable and modernize it, it will be one of the best tools we have to address the climate crisis. This yard will be bigger than the current yard. It'll have capacity for more buses, an increase of over 50%, as a matter of fact. And it will improve the working conditions for the frontline workers at the yard. It'll make it a seismically safe yard, and there will be more staff people that work at the yard when we complete this project, over 800, as a matter of fact. And finally, this yard shows how MTA is being very creative with our limited public resource of publicly owned land. We are a transit agency, but we're using this land to address the housing crisis by building housing atop a working bus yard. And this is the first time in this nation that this kind of a project will be attempted. So it shows that we're trying to be creative and think outside the box to address the critical housing crisis. That's not only an issue here in the city, but also in the region and beyond as well. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. I'll take it from here. My name is Bonnie Jean Von Crow. I'm a public affairs manager at the SFMTA and working on this project. Can we go to the next slide? So talking a little bit, thanks, John talked a little bit about some of the key needs that we have to improve the yard. And so because of that, the SFMTA started this process about going out to the community, talking about the needs of the yard and really getting feedback on, what people would like to see here back in 2018. And so that initial outreach spanned from 2018 until can we stay on that slide? Thank you. Until about 2021. So we did a number of outreach events, community open houses, community workshops. Once the pandemic hit, we transitioned to virtual events to really keep information to the community flowing. And then we also kicked off in this time period our Potrero Yard Neighborhood Working Group, which has really been essential to the SFMTA's planning for this project. It gave us a touchstone to the community. We've had folks in that group who have helped us to really develop this project and really focus in the community feedback on key issues. So give us that in-depth view of community feedback and spend, years with us, seeing what the community needs, what the project can do here as we consider being a great neighbor to the community for the next 100 years. So one of those tasks that we did during this time was develop design guidelines. And those were those elements of the project that, really we put into the request for proposals and said, hey, those are things like the height requirements, requirements around affordability. These things that we heard from the community that were discussed during this time period went all into the design guidelines that then we put out to developer teams. And we conducted a two-step procurement process. And so we did an RFQ, a request for qualifications, as well as the RFP, request for proposals. We had shortlisted the request for proposals. 3 teams submitted proposals, and then the SFMTA last November, in November 2022, the SFMTA board selected the Potrero Yard. The PNC team, the Potrero Neighborhood Collective team. And then finally, the last thing we did as part of that process was going through the draft environmental impact report process. So the DEIR came out of the initial timeline prior to bringing the PNC team on board, and now they are completing the final CEQA process associated with that. So it's one of the innovations that we've done with this project is to really do some of these things up front to try to make, we're all familiar with how long development projects can take in the city of San Francisco, to trying to really do something innovative to shorten that timeline. And I will hand it off to Chris, I believe.
Bonnie Jane, we're gonna pause a bit. I don't know if folks have noticed, but there's a little glitch in the slides. We're going to fix that and apologize for the technical issue, but we'll fix that very quickly. And in the meantime, I do want to remind folks about how to submit questions that you may have regarding the project throughout the presentation. So if you would like to text, is area code 510-244-4865. That's 510-244-4865. And if you're on Zoom, you can click the chat and go ahead and in the toolbar, select submit question 1 or submit questions here, either one of those would get your questions directly to us. Again, thank you for your patience as we figured out that tech issue, and thank you to the team for remedying it quickly. So at this time, we'll hand it back over to Chris.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Hargy. I'm with Plenary Americas. Plenary is one of the Can you hear me?
Now we can. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Hargy. I'm part of Plenary Americas, one of the team members of Potrero Neighborhood Collective. So, as we've described, Potrero Neighborhood Collective is made up of a consortium of a number of different firms that have come together to respond to this project. So, Plenary Americas is an infrastructure developer, US-based company. We are a company with a lot of experience in public-private partnerships in North America. As well, we have three affordable housing developers with Meta, YCD, and TCD. These are experienced developers in affordable housing in the San Francisco area. In addition to the development team, we also have a design team composed of IBI Arcadis and YA Studios. Together, these firms have over 30 years of experience in architecture and design, experience in infrastructure, as well as over 23 years of affordable housing experience in San Francisco. To round out the team, we also have a number of consultants supporting us, Plant Construction, Allen Group, and DNA Communications. And with Plant and Allen Group, they have over 30 years of experience in the Bay Area with construction costing experience. As well, DNA consultants have over 35 years of providing Bay Area communications consulting. So together, that makes the Potrero Neighborhood Collective, PNC. Next slide, please. So part of the, I'm going to elaborate a little bit on what our role is in this pre-development phase. So continuing from what Bonnie Jean was describing as the planning phase and in the previous timeline discussion, what we're doing in this pre-development phase, this 18 to 24-month pre-development phase, are a number of things. Specifically, PNC is advancing design of the bus facility and housing facility and housing. You can go back one slide, please. We are advancing design of the bus facility and housing facilities. We are continuing to work on the housing feasibility and assess market conditions for the housing solution that we've proposed. Additionally, we are also contracting for a design builder for the bus facility and are looking to start that process, which will be a two-stage process of preparing an RFQ. And if folks can go on mute, please. As well, we will be obtaining regulatory approvals for entitlements and for environmental, as we previously described, as well as preparing and conducting public outreach sessions and engagements with the community. And lastly, we will also be negotiating various agreements for after the pre-development phase. Next slide, please. As part of our commitment to providing transparency and engaging with the communities, Potrero Neighborhood Collective has engaged with the community, and this is really a snapshot of what we've conducted to date. So that has been starting with the pre-application meeting back in December, continuing to meet with the neighborhood working group meetings on a monthly basis, a number of community-focused events where PNC has been part of And similar to this session, we've had a in-person open house back in March that had a lot of attendance, and some of the pictures that you see are from that event, as well as engaging with various stakeholders. This is just where we are in the process, but we will continue to have more engagement sessions, particularly community listening sessions with various stakeholders and ongoing discussions with more stakeholders. Next slide. And so as I described, we would also be doing as part of our pre-development phase, we would be doing a 2-stage RFQ and RFP process to bring on a contractor onto our team. And so once we have brought on that contractor, we would move to beyond the pre-development phase, and that contractor would work with us to demolish the existing Potrero yard and replace it to design and build the new Potrero yard, the new bus facility. As well, once we're, as I described, we're also working on the various contracts that would occur after the pre-development phase. We call that a public-private partnership agreement. And that agreement would also describe how the bus facility would be maintained for 30 years, as well as the ground lease for the housing that would be for 75 years. And I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Tony Gill.
Well, hi, everyone. So my name is Tony Gill. I'm the design architectural lead for the project. I'm with Arcadis IBI Group and representing the Potrero Neighborhood Collective team. I'm going to give you a quick overview of the project. Look forward to many of the questions because there's a lot that goes into the design of this facility. But I'm going to give you a quick overview on the architectural and how we ended up where we did. So first of all, let's go back, please. So one of the first things we did is really understand the neighborhood. We spent a lot of time combing around the neighborhood, understanding all the amenities and the things that are important to this community around the bus yard, including the bus yard. It was also a very important aspect of the community. And when we did that, we started to approach the site. It's a very large site. We looked at these 8 nodes that you see on the screen, the 4 blue nodes being the intersections of the major streets, with 17th being at the top of the screen and Mariposa being at the bottom of the screen. So those 4 blue nodes are really important intersections. And so we addressed our design around those. And then the 2 yellow nodes are what we call the mid-block nodes. And we wanted to make sure that in the mid-block that there was some activity so that those spaces could be activated. And that's really where we're going to have the residents, lobbies and entry points. The 2 green nodes, one at the end of York Street, which you see at the bottom of the screen, is going to have a special feature there so that as you come down York, you see that and you see the bus yard. On 17th side, you see the green node on facing the Franklin Square. That is also an important spot, and we want something there that activates 17th and looks at the park and has a relationship with the park. Next slide, please. So this is an aerial view looking at the site from the north back towards the southeast. And you can see Bryant Street off to the right and 17th to your left. So there's really a strong connection between the park and 17th Street. You can see the housing sitting on top, and the housing kind of steps down towards the park. And it also has views over towards the park, and the park has views back towards the housing. On the right side, you can see, on the right side of the screen, you can see Bryant Street, and you can see the housing coming down and touching Bryant Street. So let's go to the next slide, please. And the next one. Okay, and just very quickly, just how the project is organized and how it stacks on the site. So if you look here at the very top is the housing, and then just below the housing, we have a roof deck. And below that roof deck, there are 2 levels of bus parking. And then just below that, there's a mezzanine. And the mezzanine is where all the office space and coordination space for all the staff and everything is located. And then just below that, and then this is the main level. And this main level connects with Mariposa Street. And that's where all the buses are parked with, and how they get all their maintenance done is down at this level. But they actually park at the upper 2 levels. So as they come off of Mariposa, they come in, get maintenance done and cleaned, and then they go upstairs to the parking. And then there's also a bus wash and clean at those 2 levels. And then there's a partial basement, and it kind of houses, it's more focused towards Bryant Street. And down there is just the loading and garbage pickup and just general deliveries and things that happen down there. But it's a smaller footprint of an underground basement level. Next slide, please. And I think Bonnie Jean, you're going to talk to this.
Thanks, Tony. Yes, so you heard a little bit about the bus yard facility and what we're planning for that, for the new facility, and wanted to talk a little bit about the employees and the employees who work there. So the SFMTA has currently at the Potrero Yard 391 employees. 245 of those are operators who are out driving our buses. And then we have 138 buses. And that really, our yard right now is at what we call crush capacity. It's just everything is packed in there. And so we're very excited. The future facility will be able to hold, as John mentioned earlier, over 50% more buses. So really allowing the SFMTA to keep up with demand and support public transit in the city. It'll have significantly more employees as well, 829 employees. And then just to give people a sense, you know, at any given time at the yard, we have about 100 employees who are on site at a given time. So it's not like 829 people will be in the neighborhood at once. So really, we're looking at about 100 employees at the site at a given day. And then we also have, in addition to parking for our buses, we also have 157 spots for what we call non-revenue vehicles. So buses are our revenue vehicles, and non-revenue vehicles are just other types of vehicles we use to make transit service work. And so we have a number of transit vehicle spaces for alternate uses, and then 84 sort of standard non-revenue vehicle spots as well. And those are all for official uses. I do want to acknowledge, though, as we think about our employees at the yard, one of the things that SFMTA is looking at across all our divisions is how our employees are getting to work, right? So while we know that our employees, a lot of them who pull out bus service in the early mornings, they may need to drive to work. And we are putting together a transportation demand management plan that will give a variety of options for employees on how they can get to work, encouraging getting to work by other modes. But for those folks who absolutely have to drive, right? They're fixing the buses in the morning. They're on those early morning maintenance crews, or they're doing the first pullouts before transit even starts running. We know that those folks will need a place to that we know they drive. And so that's part of our demand management planning, is thinking through options for those folks. And part of what we're looking at is parking management. And so one of the things why we're highlighting sort of the non-revenue vehicle spaces at the yard is that as we work with our employees and with our labor unions to kind of talk through these issues, we are putting into the new yard these 84 non-revenue vehicle spaces, which give us some flexibility in those conversations about our transportation demand management. Next slide.
Thank you, Bonnie Jean. As we transition over to learn more about housing and commercial component of the project, just want to thank you all for submitting your questions. We see them coming, we've got them. And as more questions pop up or comments, please feel free to jot them in. So next slide, please. Hand it over to Caroline Feng to tell us more about housing.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. My name is Caroline Feng, and I am with Mission Economic Development Agency with Young Community Developers and Tabernacle Community Development Corporation. We are the affordable housing developers in the Potrero Neighborhood Collective. And we come to you with over 100 years of experience in our neighborhoods of the Mission, Potrero, and Bayview. And of that, 40 years in building affordable housing in these neighborhoods. So we're very excited that we're able to be part of this once in a lifetime opportunity for San Francisco to address the critical housing need while improving a vital part of the transit system. Our vision started with the design guidelines that were developed through the community process in 2018 to 2020 that you've heard about. And it's really to build an intergenerational mixed income community that maximizes the number of units and affordability for San Francisco so that we can address our critical housing need. Next slide, please. So in order to do this and achieve this vision, we also have to really think about the complexities of not just having the bus facility, which you heard about, but also the complexities of having the housing above and adjacent to the bus yard. And in order to do that, we've been spending this period to take the time to do due diligence and analyze and refine our project concept. Part of this process is assessing if and how changing market conditions can impact the various parts of the project. One of the first conditions is building the housing units so that the construction of the housing can be completed prior to the bus yard starting operations in 2027, so that the construction does not disrupt operations. Another consideration is for the housing to be affordable. The housing receives significant funding from the state to pay for the costs of building the buildings. The state financing for affordable housing is highly competitive with restricted amounts of funding. And so even though we have a state-wide housing crisis, there's lots of building going on to build towards that housing crisis. And so there's limited opportunities for Potrero Neighborhood Collaborative to compete for this funding. We also have to design the housing such that it meets the guidelines that were developed with community input, from height to massing to shadow that the building will cast on neighbors, especially Franklin Square Park. And then lastly, we were awarded this opportunity in November 2022. The economic conditions in the last 6 months make this an interesting and challenging time for the projects to start its development process. The last 6 months, we've seen the Federal Reserve increase interest rates. And that for us means more expensive loans and raw materials, which drives up the cost of construction. And so we're looking into how to be able to build with all these changes. Next slide, please. So the housing and commercial buildings that we've conceived to fit on the site will look like this. You can see the design, and you got to see it briefly earlier too. The housing commercial component will have residential units that are targeted for low-income seniors, and that's what you see in the blue. Low-income families, and that's above the blue and the green, and moderate-income workforce households. We'll be able to have the entire building be available for residents to be a unified community by being on the podium, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Next slide, please. As you can see, we're planning to build the housing to maximize the units while minimizing the shadow. And so the maximum building height will be 150 feet as measured from Mariposa and York Streets. And this really minimizes the shadow impact on Franklin Square Park. Next slide, please. In order to make sure that we have an affordable housing, we're proposing 513 units that will be a range of 101 senior housing buildings, studios, and 1 bedrooms, and the seniors will be paying 15 to 45% in area median income. That's what we're targeting as seniors. The families will be paying a range from, including the workforce, 30 to 120% of area median income, and they'll be able to have a range of being in studios, 1s, 2s, and 3 bedrooms. We'll also have 3 property management units on site for the property management of the site too. Next slide, please. As we started to think about how do we continue to make this, we've talked about being intergenerational and really a livable community. We really had to think about how do we do this both on the ground floor as well as on the podium level, so that our residents could, as you think about, well, who's going to get to live here and how do they really interact? We had to think besides the who, where would they get to interact? And so we built in communities, spaces of green gardens so that our residents can plant and build be able to plant fresh vegetables. They'll have access to childcare on site with 2 family childcare units, and young children with their families can play in the tot lots around the childcare as well as in areas specifically designated for them. You can see an example of that in the picture next to it. And outside, besides the outside areas, we'll also have indoor areas, community rooms that will open to the outside so that we can have large celebrations or small celebrations. And so our families and residents really have an opportunity to come together as a big community, or also as smaller neighboring families getting together for smaller events too. Next slide. And this is a view for if you're actually living and traveling across that podium. Imagine yourself on a Sunday afternoon, either being able to just sit and enjoy the view of other families or residents being able to walk around, being able to watch an outdoor movie on the walls in between the building, or being able to watch the kids being able to ride their bicycles around. So really having that spaciousness, given that there are that many units, but also being able to feel like there are places to specifically play and or just have some quiet time. Next slide. Moving down to the ground floor, we also recognize that we are building with a neighborhood, and so we wanted to make sure our residents as well as our neighbors really have active places to interact with the building. And we want to be able to shop local, and so on the 3 corners of Hampshire and 7th, Bryant, 17th, Bryant and 17th, and Mariposa and 17th, we have 3-corner retail spaces. We also will have outdoor kiosks for street vendors to be able to do smaller businesses to also be able to activate 17th Street. So with all these opportunities, we really want to make sure that the building really is connected with our neighborhood as much as possible. Last slide. On my side. And so wanted to just do a quick poll and hear from you as we think about how we really continue to be locally based and be community based. What kind of neighborhood servicing organizations or businesses would you visit on the various corners if you were shopping or playing or even just getting the services from the neighborhood? I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer to run the poll.
Yeah, so a box should pop up and there'll be a few different options for you to think about and consider what type of businesses. You click the options, as many as you like. Don't feel restricted, like you have to only pick one. And there it is. It just popped up on my end. You should be able to see it too. So we'll have about a minute for folks to respond, unless I hear from the team that we got full response before the minute is up. So the options are cafe or restaurant, convenience store, community kitchen, library, job employment and development center, medical service clinic, safe drop-in or study space for youth, or bike repair shop. And again, click as many as you like and think about both businesses and community serving organizations. All right, we should be wrapping up in just a bit. So if you haven't had a chance to click your favorite options, please do. Again, what kind of neighborhood serving organizations or businesses would you like to visit? And we'll be closing this in just a few seconds. All right, great. The survey has completed, and I'll hand it back over to Caroline for the next survey.
So this is we just talked about the corner retail businesses. If you go to the next slide. We're also really interested in thinking about 17th Street. We're proposing on 17th Street for a number of street vendors to be available, to be stationed for the folks over at Franklin Square Park who might be using the park, as well as for our residents, as well as all of our local folks living in the neighborhood too, or working in the neighborhood too. And so want to hear from you, what kind of street vendors would you like to see on 17th Street? Again, I'll have Jennifer open up the poll and
all right,
talk through how to.
The poll is now open. You can see it should pop up on your screen. And again, this is multiple choice and you can pick as many as you'd like. And if you see something, or if you like to see something that's not on the list, you can always put that in the chat as well, or text it over to us at area code 510-244-4865. So we'll have about 20, 30 more seconds to complete the survey before it is completed. All right, we'll be wrapping it up in just a couple seconds. Great, thank you for your input. We will be taking this back and using it as part of that decision-making process. But for now, let's turn it over to Bonnie Jean on the next slide. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you. So yeah, just to turn a little bit to the transportation needs of residents at the yard. So part of what MTA did when considering this project and talking with community is really look towards the city's transit first policy. So this is a policy put in place by our Board of Supervisors back in 1973. So we're actually celebrating the 50th anniversary of San Francisco's transit first policy. And what it does is it really prioritizes and encourages transit use and other active modes like bicycling, walking, van pool, and over the use of private automobiles, right? And that is both to support quality of life, to support economic activity in the city, and so we're not stuck with sort of gridlock on our streets. And so this project is developed with that policy in mind. And when we put it together, we really were supporting the vision of the city. And so it is, part of that is that it's required not to include resident or public parking at the facility itself, and really encourage those sustainable alternatives to driving. And you can see on the screen, if you want to find out more about the city's transit first policy, there's a QR code, or you can visit sfmta.com/transit first policy. Next slide. I'll hand it over to Chris.
Thank you. So to confirm, as the first joint development housing over a bus facility in the nation, the transportation needs of the residents and visitors of this building will start with a transit first approach. So to build on what Bonnie Jean was describing, Potrero Neighborhood Collective is developing a transportation demand management plan that considers existing and new transportation resources for future residents and current residents. Some of those a number of those resources include on-site amenities to reduce the needs to travel, such as childcare services. Next slide, it's fine. On-site amenities to reduce the need to travel, such as laundry facilities, fitness equipment on-site, parcel delivery lockers for temporary storage of deliveries, car share options, which are located in the basement of the facility, of the housing facility, and various drop-off locations for ride-hailing services. And now I think I'm turning it back over to IBI.
Thanks, Chris. So it's Tony Gill again. That's why I'm the design lead and architect with IBI Group. So I'm just going to quickly we'll walk you through our design approach. And as I said earlier, this is a complex facility. It is to house all the buses, and there are electrified buses and state-of-the-art buses, as well as the state-of-the-art facility. So one of the key things, and I'm just going to stay on this image for a moment. Oh, can you please go back? So one of the key things here that because it is a bus yard facility, we have to make sure it's operationally efficient and it does all the things that it needs to do. So when you look at the bus yard, the main level, which comes off of Mariposa Street, we call it a conditioned space, means that the bus yard where all the maintenance happens is fully enclosed. And it's glazed in, and it's got roll-up doors and everything. And then all the maintenance happens in the center of the facility. So all the movement of the buses inside the facility happen around the perimeter within it, but it's an enclosed space. And, you know, with respect to the acoustics and all those kind of things, we do have acoustic engineers looking at the sound levels. We're meeting all the design guidelines and the conditions that are required for the acoustic levels. But that lower level from Mariposa is all enclosed. And as it approaches 17th Street, it gets fully buried under the ground. So the facility at the lower level eventually fades into being underground. Above, there's 2 levels of bus parking. And around the bus parking areas, you can see we have metal screens. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the metal screens in a bit, but the metal screens is for twofold. One, it allows the air and ventilation to move through the facility. And the other thing it does, it gives us an opportunity to see and look into the facility and see all the buses that are parking there. There has been comments from other neighborhoods and people saying, look, we don't want to really lose the visual connection with the bus yard. It's been there for 125 years. So we still want to be able to see that because it's been part of the fabric. So looking here on the right, you see on 17th Street, there's a glass facade. You can see the ramps of the buses, and you'll be able to see the movement of the buses. Again, an important aspect to this community was to be able to still connect with the bus yard facility. Here on the corner of Hampshire and 17th, you can see a retail component, bringing a little bit more activity. As Caroline said, we do have the kiosks that come along 17th, but we also have this retail component. Next slide, please. And on Bryan Street, which is a more active street and is where a lot of the bus lines and stuff happen, our housing actually comes down to the street level. So on this side, you don't see the bus yard as much, and you see all the housing. And if you look at the architectural, we are doing lots of things with the grids and the window formats to kind of align with some of the character of some of the larger buildings around in the neighborhood, some of the historic buildings as well. And then here you can see on the left side of the screen, can we go back, please? You can see a 17th Street, and you can see that there's opportunities for activating that street and having people come across from the park and connect over to the facility. Next slide. Next slide, please. There you go. This is the corner of Bryan and Mariposa. And you can see the KQED facility to the right there. Again, we're bringing the housing all the ways down to the street here with some commercial aspects down at the lower level. On the right side, in the middle of the screen, you can see the buses coming out of the facility. And then just above that, you can see some more of the bus parking. Again, we're going to be asking for some feedback on look and feel, but really trying to bring that level of housing down to the street along the side. Next slide. So along Mariposa Street, it has always been Mariposa has always been the street where buses have come in and out of the facility. So we're going to continue to use Mariposa Street as it always has been used. This is a straight on view from York. And you can see here across the bottom floor there, that's all an enclosed space, meaning it's all with windows and glazing and glass. that comes across the bottom. And just above that is 2 levels of parking with the screen. And that's primarily all the bus yard parking that sits up at the top. Next slide, please. And here you can see at the corner of Mariposa and Hampshire, and when you can see here where the little red square is in the middle of the screen, that's the actual entry point for the buses. The screen comes down to the ground here on the corner. And then just to the right of the screen, we're looking at adding some glass there so you can visually see the stairs and you can see the elevators, because that's an entry pickup drop-off spot for some of the staff coming into the facility. There's also another entry point for the staff at the corner of Bryant and 17th, which I missed to add. But let's go to the next slide. And here you can see again a render of Hampshire and 17th Street. And the piece that you see down Hampshire there, which is a large vertical piece, that's one of the lobby entries to the housing on top. There's a similar one on the other side on Bryant Street as well. Next slide. Just with respect to, this is a bit of a night shot. We're looking at different ways of treating lighting. How do we manage the lighting? How do we manage light pollution? So those things are under study, and there's going to be some questions or a survey with respect to lighting as well. But you can see that the facility at night will take on a little bit of a different character, give you a little bit more visual connection, and provide some lighting on the street and making the streets safer and accessible for people as they move around. Next slide. I think that is Jennifer.
Yes, thanks, Tony.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Moore, a landscape architect with Arcadis IBI and team member of the Potrero Neighborhood Collective. I'm the lead designer on the streetscape and podium level elements of the project. And this streetscape on 17th is designed to create a human scale and welcoming environment. It's got 15-foot sidewalks, providing space for comfortable pedestrian movement and activation. The space allocation, it allows us to have new trees, bike parking, cafe tables, sidewalk retail kiosks, and pedestrian scale lighting. These are all important elements for a successful streetscape. So the team really focused on visually and physically connecting to Franklin Square and providing opportunities for activation. The design of 17th Street obviously involves more than just the sidewalk. As Tony pointed out, it's showcasing the bus activity through the facade. It's activated through the retail and amenity offerings, as well as the staff entrance at the corner of Bryant and 17th Street. And it's also an opportunity to integrate public art. Next slide, please. So for 17th Street, we'd like to hear from you. We'd like to hear what type of sidewalk uses you would like to see on 17th to create a welcoming environment. I think Jennifer will take over the poll.
Great. Everyone should see a poll pop up on their screen. What type of sidewalk uses would you like to see on 17th Street to create a welcoming environment? And again, please pick as many as you like, as many options, and that you think would work for this area that you would like to see, as well as feel free to type additional thoughts and ideas into the chat or by texting area code 510-244-4865. And we'll be doing a couple more of these polls throughout. We really want to get your feedback and input as we progress the design of the project. All right, we'll have about 10 more seconds to respond.
Okay, so next we're going to look at the trees and landscaping. So the trees and landscaping around the site are important for pedestrian comfort and scale, as well as neighborhood character. But there's some important considerations in the selection of the trees around the site, especially given the site's use as a bus facility. There's overhead conflicts such as wires and streetlights we need to consider, and the trees need to be selected to not only support the local ecology and contribute to the urban tree canopy, but the size should be considered so that the trees complement the architecture and public art. They should also be in appropriate shapes so that with enough overhead clearance for people walking along the sidewalk. So the next slide, we have the survey. So there's a number of small, medium, and large locally appropriate species that we're considering. And we'd like you to provide your input on some of your favorites.
So again, you see a survey pop up on your screen, and this one is a little bit tricky. We have split up the images into two different slides within two different polls. So this first question is for images 1 through 5. And if you're not a fan of any of those, you can always click the none option. That's also an option. And we'll stick here for about 10 more seconds before moving over to the next slide. At that time, you can scroll down on your survey and you'll see items 6 through 11 available. All right, can we go to the next slide? And I do want to point out, you can always move your poll around if you are wanting to see images. It is movable with a mouse. You click it and scoot it on over. You can see the images of numbers 6 through 11. Again, click as many as you are favoring and would like to be considered for landscaping around the yard. And if there are none, you can also click none. We'll close the tree species landscaping poll in about 10 seconds. All right, great. Thank you all for your responses. And thank you, Jennifer, for sharing about streetscape and landscaping. We'll turn it back over to Tony for the next slide.
Thanks, Jennifer. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about look and feel. So we're just in that process. And so this is a great opportunity to get public feedback on what you're thinking about look and feel. And, you know, some of the key things that we look at is the glass, you know, the types of glass that we use, the color of the glass, the quality of the glass with respect to reflectivity and clarity. And then there's also the metal screening, which we'll come back to in a moment, and also color of materials. And then also look at our artistic components. Where does the art sit? How does it integrate to the facility? Now, with regards to the massing, there's been lots of work done over the massing, and it's within the established building envelope. So that means it meets all the guidelines, and you know, we've tested for the shadows and stuff. And so we're within all those requirements. So massing is pretty good. And the functionality of the building and its materials are really important. So there is the need for the materials to make sure they are of a quality and stuff that kind of make sure that that facility functions the way it needs to function. And then the look and feel has to look to, well, how does it sit within the neighborhood? How does it integrate with that neighborhood as well? And how does the art integrate with it? So those are things with the look and feel that we're in the process of getting, and getting your feedback on this is going to be important. So let's go to the next slide. So one of the main elements to the building is the screening. So if you see here, we have 3 different types. So the first one is looking at screening that maybe has a lot of color to it. And you saw in the earlier renders that, you know, the screening wraps a building. Item 2 here shows the screening kind of wrapping the building and having kind of a design to the screen. And then on the right, you see a different type of screening, which is less of a design wrapped around it, but you allow the screening just to be a screen. Oh, wasn't the survey supposed to come up, Jennifer?
Yes, a survey will pop up similar to the trees survey. You can select any of the images that you see on your screen as your preferred image, or multiple of those images. And you also have that option to select none. And we appreciate your feedback, and we'll have one more survey after this one. So we'll leave it here for about 10 more seconds before we move on to the next one. Great, thank you so much for your input. Turning back over to you, Tony, for the next slide.
Great. So this one is a lot about the lighting and to some extent the color, because lighting and color kind of come together here. So on the first image, it's about providing plenty of lighting that provides punch and lots of color and very vibrant. And the one on the level 2 here, it's a little bit more subdued colors and with a little bit more washed out lighting, so that the colors aren't as punchy, but they're still there and they provide some character and look. Down at level 3 is meaning that, let's go back. Number 3 there is more of controlling the light and controlling the light levels and looking at light pollution and make it much more subdued. And so it's a different level of lighting as well. So maybe what we should do is get the survey should come up now, Jennifer? Yeah, perfect. And maybe it's a combination of all 3. And if you do pick all 3, it means that you may want to see something that's a combination of all 3. Right.
Great. Thank you all for participating in the survey. We really appreciate and appreciate your feedback and input. This does conclude our final survey for the evening. So thank you again, and we'll be turning it over to the next section, which is on public art. If we can have the survey closed and move to the next slide, please. Thank you. Jackie Von Tresco will be taking us away with public art.
Hi, thanks, Jennifer. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jackie Von Tresco, and I'm the Senior Program Manager for Public Art at the San Francisco Arts Commission. Go to the next slide, please. For those of you not familiar, the San Francisco Arts Commission was established by city charter in 1932 and is the city's agency that champions the arts as essential to daily life by investing in a vibrant arts community and enlivening the urban environment and shaping innovative cultural policy. As an agency, we're committed to creating a city where all artists and cultural workers have the freedom, resources, and platform to share their stories, art, and culture, and where race does not predetermine one's success in life. We also acknowledge that we do this work as guests on the unceded traditional homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone people. In 1969, the city and county of San Francisco was one of the first municipalities in the country to enact an art enrichment ordinance. This ordinance ensures that 2% of the gross construction cost of civic buildings, transportation improvement projects, such as the Potrero bus yard, new parks, and other above ground structures, such as bridges, be allocated for public art. Next slide. The Arts Commission's public art program strives to ensure that all city residents, workers, and visitors have access to world-class art in everyday settings by commissioning work that promotes a diverse and stimulating cultural environment and is site-specific and meaningful to you, the community. Next slide. So we're going to stay on this slide for a second as I try to condense about an 8-month process down into just a few minutes here. So the Arts Commission's process for planning and implementing our public art projects is guided by our policies and guidelines, which are available for you to review on our website if you're interested. At the start of each project, we meet with the project client and design team to review and discuss the project design, goals, and timeline, and review the art enrichment budget and available artwork opportunities, as well as discuss our strategy for community outreach and engagement. When we meet with the community, as we're doing today, we like to receive your feedback and input on the identified artwork opportunities, goals, and themes. For this particular project, PNC created a public art survey, which starting in mid-March has been circulated through their and the Arts Commission's networks, both online and at in-person community project meetings. We ask community members what themes they'd like to see reflected in the artwork at Potrero Yard and what they would like the artwork to convey to future generations. The survey closed earlier this month and we've received upwards of 120 responses, which is significant. While we're still collating the survey responses, our preliminary review does show a strong interest from community in seeing artwork that is created by local artists and that is colorful, uplifting, and reflects local culture and neighborhood history. After we receive client and community input, we will then create what's called a project plan, which is a 2 to 3 page document that outlines the project background, artwork goals, artwork opportunities, the budget, artist selection process, and scoring criteria, as well as the estimated timeline. This project plan is reviewed and approved by community stakeholders, the client agency before we bring it to the Arts Commission for approval. Once we have an approved project plan, the Arts Commission will post the public art request for qualifications, or otherwise known as a call for artists. The RFQ is typically open for about 8 weeks, during which time we will conduct extensive artist outreach and recruitment. For this project, we'll work closely with the district supervisor's office, the Calle 24 Latino Cultural District, local arts organizations such as the Galleria de la Raza and Southern Exposure, and artist studios like the 1890 and Pacific Felt Factory Studios to really ensure that we're getting the word out as broadly and widely as possible to our local artist community about these artwork opportunities. During this time, when the RFQ is open, the Arts Commission will also host an in-person and virtual application workshop or a series of workshops where we will offer technical assistance to artists who are interested in applying but may need support in doing so. Once the RFQ closes, that's when our artist review panel process begins. This panel will be comprised of a representative of the client agency, an arts commissioner, 3 outside arts professionals who are from or have a meaningful connection to this community and neighborhood, 1 community representative, and 1 representative of the Potrero Yard design team. The panel will convene to identify 3 finalists for each artwork opportunity, who will then be invited to meet with the project stakeholders and then develop site-specific conceptual proposals under the Arts Commission's guidance. When these proposals are complete, they'll be put on display both online and in a physical location near the project site for public comment. And after the 2-week public comment period ends, our artist review panel will reconvene and the artists will present their proposals and be interviewed by the panelists. The panelists will also review the public comments that are received on each of the proposals, the results of the artist reference checks, as well as maintenance and materials reports provided by our collections team. They'll discuss and score the artists based on and their proposals based on the scoring criteria that we outlined in the project plan, which typically includes artistic merit, the appropriateness to project goals, feasibility, and maintenance. The highest scoring artist for each opportunity will then be recommended to the Arts Commission for approval. And once approved, those artists will go under contract with the Arts Commission for the design, engineering, fabrication, and consultation during installation of their artwork. In total, like I mentioned, this process takes approximately 8 months from start to finish, and all of our review panel meetings and Arts Commission meetings are held virtually and open to the public. Next slide. So highlighted in this slide are some of the artwork opportunities identified by PNC that are currently under consideration. PNC took its inspiration from the neighborhood and those surrounding it, as well as initial community input that it received when identifying these options. The Arts Commission is now working with the project team to further assess these opportunities based on a number of criteria. And these include, visibility and accessibility of the artwork, its integration with the architecture and site, its durability and maintenance, artists who can create work for that opportunity, and additional feedback received from the community from both our survey and subsequent community meetings like today. The opportunities you see highlighted here include different material approaches, including integrated architectural screens, architectural glass, mural opportunities as well as mosaic opportunities. We really want to think about opportunities that will be available to the broadest swath of artists possible. We're also performing a cost analysis on these options to assess how we can really maximize and make the greatest impact with the art enrichment funds that are being generated by the Potrero Bus Yard project. In terms of our next steps, we're going to be bringing the Potrero Yard Public Art Project Plan, a draft of it, to the Potrero Yard Neighborhood Working Group on June 6th for additional review and feedback. And once reviewed and approved by the project client, we'll be bringing it to the Arts Commission for approval, hopefully next month on June 21st. The request for qualifications or our artist call for these opportunities will then be posted shortly after on June 23rd or thereabouts. We'd really love for you all to be involved in our process now moving forward. So I'd encourage you to please sign up for our newsletter for updates about this project and about associated public meetings. We'd also love it if you could help us spread the word to your artist friends when the RFQ is open. And if you're an artist, please apply yourself. We'd love for you to submit an application. You also are welcome to attend and listen to the artist review panel meetings, which are held virtually on WebEx, as well as the artist orientation meeting. And of course, check out the artist proposals when they're on display to give us your feedback when that time comes. Thank you all so much for your time and attention today. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me with any questions or feedback you might have about the public art for Potrero Yard now or moving forward. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you, Jackie, for sharing that information about public art. If we go to the next slide. This concludes our presentation on the Potrero Yard Modernization Project tonight. As you can see, we are opening up the question and answer session. Again, if you have a question, please, or a comment, please feel free to type it into the chat or text it to number 510, area code number 510-244-4865. As you can imagine, we've been receiving questions throughout the presentation, and we'll jump right into them. And as more questions come in, we'll continue to respond. The first set of questions are around the Local Business Enterprise Program, the LBE program. There's several different questions, and the first one is there a program in place for utilizing micro local business enterprises? And what is your micro hiring goal? So Potrero Neighborhood Collective has proposed a local business enterprise inclusion program, and we're actively finalizing it with the city to consider the very specific into the micro LBE program. Once that is finalized, we will share that information, but at this time, our LBE goal is 20 to 25% of LBE, and it is split across the project. So as you heard Chris share earlier in the presentation, the project is split up into several phases. We're currently in the pre-development phase, and then after entitlements are obtained, we would move into the project agreement phase. During that phase is when construction and final design would be conducted, and that is considered splitting into infrastructure, which is the bus yard, as well as so for that design, final design is 25% local business across both pieces, the bus yard and the housing. During specific construction, it's 20% LBE for both the bus yard and the housing, as well as during facility and property management over the long term of the project as a public-private partnership. We also have a 20% LBE goal. So in summary, I know there's quite a bit, there's different pieces. The summary is 20 to 25% LBE goal for the project throughout the life of the project, from design through the facility management and property management. The next question related to local business enterprises: which firms or companies have you been in contact with regarding with regards to contractor LBE outreach. And going back to that structure of the project, the general contractor will be responsible for local business enterprise, subcontracting to local business enterprises. And as that contractor has not been selected yet, the outreach specifically to local businesses has been minimal. However, we are planning to outreach to really explain the process. This is a unique capital improvement project. It's not a typical design bid build. So we want to make sure that the local business, the LBE community, is well aware of the different aspects of this project ahead of any bidding opportunities. So that will be ongoing in later into 2023. And the last question, I believe the last question around LBE is, will there be someone to make sure the prime contractors will be working with hyper local community contractors? And such a great question, and really pulls towards the basis of our relationship and of Potrero Neighborhood Collective, and the real intentional and purposeful bringing together of Culinary Americas, as well as Meta, YCD, and Tabernacle, with both experience with supplier inclusion, including local businesses. Our affordable housing developer team is rooted in the mission and Bayview, Hunters Point, with those deep connections to ensure that local contractors, hyper local contractors, have just as great an opportunity to bid on the project, both during the bus yard component as well as during the housing and commercial component. All right. And we're gonna, the next question, I'm going to hand over to Chris. Does bus yard maintenance revert to SFMTA after 30 years?
Thanks, Jen. So Potrero Neighborhood Collective will have a long-term maintenance contract with SFMTA to maintain the bus facility. At the end of that term, SFMTA would continue to maintain the facility themselves, but we want to clarify at no time will Potrero Neighborhood Collective own that land. SFMTA will continue to own the bus facility for the duration of that time, of the term of the contract and beyond.
Great, thank you, Chris. Next, we will have another question for you, Chris. The city's, I believe it's referring to the Transit First City policy, is better for the city, but not for all citizens. Many families have to commute long distances to and from work, and others have very serious mobility issues, making it hard to ride public transit. This project not having parking for residents will burden the neighbors in the area. Thank you for your input.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your input. As part of our response to the TDM measures that, or TDM plan that we're putting forward, the ways in which we would try to alleviate that is through, as we mentioned, a number of indoor bicycle storage for residents, number of car share, zip cars locations in our basement. Currently, we have five car share locations located in the basement, as well as real-time transportation information displays and ride-share opportunities located around the site. Additionally, we have on-site amenities to help alleviate some of those travel demands. Specifically, those are the parcel delivery lockers that we mentioned, on-site childcare for residents. And I also want to highlight a number of identified parking garages in the area, specifically on 16th and the 16th and Hoff garages, the Mission Bartlett garage, 18 in Guerrero, and 24th in Lilac.
And Chris, could you remind us what TDM stands for?
Transit Demand Management Plan.
Okay, thank you. All right, we've got another question around parking. Will you have employee parking? Bonnie Jane, can you respond to this question, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for the question. The short answer is that there is the SFMTA policy is that we do not provide parking for employees, new employee parking for employees at our facilities. So, as I mentioned earlier, we are preparing a transportation demand management plan, similar to what Chris was talking about for residents. We are preparing one for our employees across the agency. And so part of that is that we know some of our employees drive. And so we are looking at sort of solutions for employees getting to work that can include support for carpools, parking management, options like partnering with ride-hail companies or regional transit subsidies, looking at other kinds of incentives for non-drivers, looking at alternate work schedules, improving walk and bike access, those types of things to really give employees a number of options for going to work. And then as I referenced, we do have those non-revenue vehicle spaces that as we have these transportation demand management conversations with our staff, that we can have, those are sitting there and give us some flexibility around some of these issues. If there are very specific employees like those who pull buses out in the mornings or get to work early for maintenance, something like that, where they absolutely need to drive to work because there are not other options for them.
Thank you, Bonnie Jane. Our next question is, will local residents receive priority to set up businesses for this project? Caroline, could you respond, please?
Yeah, and if somebody'd like to turn up my video, that'd be great. But if not, just respond. So local businesses will absolutely be prioritized for being in the commercial spaces. And as Potrero Neighborhood Collective includes the MIT Affordable Housing Development team, we've been in deep roots in the neighborhood and also our years of experience in supporting local businesses. Meta has over 50 years in supporting local businesses from being micro businesses all the way through their growth to becoming medium businesses, and would love to have local businesses be in our commercial spaces.
Thank you, Caroline. Our next question is, how are you planning on handling noise, high volume trash collection, air brakes, and light pollution? Multi-story metal mesh, and that's in reference to the light pollution, for depot facing existing residential properties such as those on Hampshire Street. Tony, can you respond to the question around noise and light pollution and how our design is handling and considering those two items?
Okay, so a couple of things with respect to the noise. As I mentioned earlier, there is an acoustic engineer doing a noise study, and we're going to meet the requirements as it relates to the design guidelines for the community as noise levels goes, which is, I believe, is 55 dBs. But that being said, the way we've designed the facility, a lot of the maintenance and all that kind of stuff that happens is right in the center of the facility, and that lower level of the facility is partially buried underground, and it's fully enclosed with glass and walls. So that helps with any kind of noise. It would be significantly better than what you currently have there with the current bus situation. So this is definitely going to improve the situation, and it'll be much better with respect to the screen. And these are electrified buses and things, so they have a different braking systems, and there's new buses coming out. So that is something that you have to understand, that these are buses will not be making those same kind of levels of noise. The buses, as they go upstairs and park and everything, they are, again, electrified buses, and they'll be just circulating to park. So they'll be a much more quieter than even if they were on the streets trying to circulate. They'll be a lot quieter up at those levels. The screening is really just to move air through and stuff. And so that's there. But with respect to the light pollution, the light pollution is something that, from a sustainable perspective, we have a sustainable initiative. And one of our sustainable initiatives is to control and manage the light and making sure it falls at the street level. It doesn't fall across to the residents and stuff below. But that was one of the questions we had as well, is in our earlier survey. So look to see what the survey says with respect to lighting levels and color and things like that. But, you know, our objective is to control and manage the light and really just put it where it's needed, and to make sure the streets are safe, and not to highlight and try to brighten up the entire street, and try to keep it more towards the sidewalks that are around our site. Now, with respect to garbage, so we're still working with our garbage collector and trying to understand how the garbage will be picked up and dropped off. But right now, we have done it so that not all the garbage is in one spot, in one place. So, you know, the big, heavy kind of garbage that comes out of the facility right now is located down in the basement. So the garbage trucks will go down in the basements and they'll pick up the garbage and kind of leave it. So that's the bigger, heavier kind of garbage. For the residents, we've split the residents' garbage pickup drop off right now. And again, like I said, we still have to go through this with our garbage collector and figure some of these strategies out. But we have one opportunity that's going to happen on Bryant and another one in Hampshire Street. So those will happen down along those street levels. So it's not all going to happen on one street or on one location. And it's separated out based on the volumes, and, you know, being the biggest issue would be this volume of garbage that comes out of the maintenance facility, which will be down at the lower level.
Thank you, Tony. And I noted that when you were speaking about noise, you referenced dB. For
Yeah.
anyone on the line that's unfamiliar with that term, can you describe that, please?
Yeah, it is. It's a criteria for the level of noise that is permitted through walls or for hearing levels. So it's a very standard levels of noise that you have to meet. In neighborhoods, the 55 is a fairly standard one, and it's one of the design guidelines for that. So that is a measured level that the acoustic engineer will be measuring and calculating to demonstrate that we're meeting those levels of acoustics.
Okay. Thank you, Tony. And don't go anywhere. We got another question for you.
Okay.
Will there be proper ventilation on those 2 floors of bus parking and maintenance levels? And will these windows be completely closed?
So the upper 2 levels of the bus yard facility, in particular on Mariposa and Hampshire, those 2 levels is the screen, the metal screen. So the metal screen is there such that and what I call unconditioned space, meaning that the air from outside flows through the facility and it comes out the other way. So there's not big equipment of big air handling units and stuff that are managing those 2 levels of parking. It's all based on natural ventilation and natural movement of air. Along Bryant and 17th, 17th has glazing and some screening along that side. And on Bryant Street, the housing comes all the ways down. So there is no ventilation and stuff. It happens through the screening. And it's all of a natural ventilation. So from a sustainable perspective, it's actually a really good way of moving air through.
Thank you so much, Tony, for your responses and filling us in on the bus yard component. At this time, we're going to move into housing related questions. And of course, if someone's on the line and a question about bus yard pops up, please feel free to drop it into the chat box or text it to us, and we'll circle back to those questions as well. All right, so for our first housing question, Caroline, this is actually a comment, but we do want to make sure that it's shared. We only ask that it really be affordable for families and the elderly who are the most affected by not having enough income. So there's someone that's wanting housing only for affordable and seniors.
Housing will be as affordable as we can possibly make it while still being financially feasible. And so we are working with the city to look at a number of subsidies to support seniors and potentially families to have only pay a third of their income. Otherwise, we're also going to as much as folks can afford based on AMI levels, area median income levels.
You read my mind. And also, are you able to share an estimate of what is considered affordable housing by offering a price range for the cost of each type of housing?
Yes, so for the, as I was saying earlier, for the seniors, a number of seniors will be able to, we're working with the city to have them pay only a third of their income. For those who are renting at the other levels, they could be renting for around $1,000 to $1,000 for the studios to $1,200 for the one bedrooms. And for similarly for anybody renting the studios that are family in our family units, they could be renting for as low as $720 to as high as $3,700 for our two bedrooms. So their studios could go as low as $720, and the two bedrooms could go as high as $300 and $700. On the lowest end, the two bedrooms could go for as low as $930, if folks were wondering.
Thank you, Caroline. And it's important to note that these numbers may shift a bit as time goes on and housing is anticipated in a few years from now, correct?
Yes. Let me clarify that these are based on the 2022 income levels for the area and how we calculate then the rents from those income levels. As we get closer to actually leasing up, we will be updating the rents, and then those rents will be closer to what the rents are at the time of lease up.
Okay, great. And the next question is for both you and Chris. The question is, can you make clear that there is no parking in the building for residents, employees, etc.? Is there a study or calculation to predict the increase of cars or demand of street parking?
So I can start with the answer. There will be no parking for residents on site as currently designed. And we are engaging in a study to look at how affordable housing residents in the neighborhood are using transportation in all the different ways. And we're also have other studies that SFMTA has conducted across the city to be able to understand what the transportation usage is, including parking and use of cars that we can then predict for this building.
Great, thank you. The next question is for Jennifer Moore, part of our design team. And the question is, where's the street parking along the blocks? And assume that that's each street along the project site.
Okay, there is street parking on Bryant. There is also a large loading zone on Bryant for short-term parking, and there's a passenger drop-off and pickup zone. On Hampshire, there is most of the parking is located on Hampshire, but there is also a large pickup and drop-off zone on Hampshire as well. And there is some street parking on the south side of Mariposa, but there's no parking on 17th.
Great, thank you. Another question for you, Jennifer. The idea of having small vendors on the south side of 17th Street sounds good in spirit, but it seems like connecting the project to adjacent amenities is equally important. What sort of consideration to safety upgrades like a mid-block crossing or ball belts to encourage better, safer access to Franklin Square across 17th Street have there been?
Okay, yeah, so we have crossings at both Bryant and Hampshire. They're both upgraded crossings with high visibility crosswalks, and there's an overhead beacon at the Hampshire crossing. So there's 2 opportunities for safe crossings along 17th. The mid block between, it's a fairly short block, so providing a mid block crossing is not feasible.
However, if I'm not mistaken, the crossing at Hampshire Street is new.
Yes, that's what we would be referring to as a mid block crossing at this point, because there isn't currently a crossing at that location.
Thank you. All right, we've got another question related to design. Tony, what are the facade treatments to make the building look nicer?
Okay, so that's a good question. And a couple of things that we're doing right now is we are scanning the neighborhood, understanding the current character and the treatment of materials and things that are, you see in that neighborhood. And some of that includes brick, concrete, and some metal cladding, as well as glass. So we're looking at a combination of these right now. We haven't kind of finalized where that all is going to sit within the facility, but those are some of the materials that we're starting to explore and begin to look at what's going to go onto the building.
Okay,
But staying within character of the neighborhood, that's one of our goals.
Another question for you, Tony. The exit stairs are glazing. Will it be illuminated at night? That light can illuminate bedrooms across the street, or can that light, if the stairwell is lit, can it illuminate bedrooms across the street? And same question for the screens. How will you prevent light illumination happening on Hampshire Street or Bryant Street?
Again, very good question. So a couple of things that we want to do is with respect to there is the one stairwell with glazing and stuff on it that's on Hampshire Street. One of the things from a sustainable perspective and from a wellness perspective, we want to encourage staff to use the stairwells when they're moving between things and not always just rely on the elevators. So the lighting level in there is very important. So because we want to make it safe, we want to make it visible. And the other thing is when people are using those stairwells, it's also what we call eyes on the street. So as people are moving through the facility, they can see what's happening on the street. So it's actually a really good crime prevention technique. Now, with respect to controlling the light, the idea is to make the lighting wash within the building and not out onto the street. So there will be studies to look at how we drop the lighting across and onto the stairwell and not too much onto the street, or how far out it extends onto the street. But that was one of our survey questions as well, is how much lighting do you really want? How much do you want to see fall across the street? Okay. Did I answer the question? Was there another one, or was just it? That was it, right?
That was great, Tony. Thank you so much.
Okay.
We do have more design questions, but this one is for Jennifer. There's an additional idea here on streetscape for 17th Street. Additional idea, improved bike lane integration. Can you talk a little bit more about the bike lane integration and some of the proposed updates?
Yeah, so the bike lanes on 17th are currently shown as separated bike lanes. They have there's a mountable curb separating the bike lane on the south side from the travel lane. The south side had to be a mountable curb to accommodate the fire trucks, but the north side, there is the full barrier curb between the bike lane and the travel lane. So we do have protected bike lanes on that block as much as is feasible.
Great, thank you for sharing that proposed plan around bike lanes. The next question is related to public art. Jackie, what murals will you have to make the community more open? I believe this question is really tied to community connectedness through murals.
Yeah, so we're obviously aware that there is a very strong mural tradition in the Mission nearby and all throughout San Francisco, and we're aware of the amazing mural artists that are in the city, and obviously want to make sure that we are making opportunities for this project available to those artists. There's a couple of the opportunities under consideration that would potentially be available to muralists. One would be the bus ramp on Hampshire and 17th Street. There's a back wall as well as the architectural glass. A mural artist could definitely create a design for both of those elements. We could also translate a mural design to mosaic tile as well. So that's definitely an opportunity that we are looking at to make available to the local mural artists who are working in the community as well.
Great. Thank you, Jackie, for sharing that. I do want to share a couple comments that we've received. This one is around public restrooms. The comment is public bathrooms are a high priority for this area. So, you know, as the questions are coming through, Tony or Jennifer, can you talk a little bit about the proposed public restroom on 17th Street?
Yes, so one of the things that we've done is, and Caroline can also jump in on this question, but we have on the corner of 17th and Bryant, a public washroom, and that public washroom is located on that corner because it has great direct access to the park across the street and especially the kids' play area. So we do have one there, and I don't know, Caroline, if you want to elaborate on that further or not.
I think that the intent is to really have the public restrooms be accessible for folks, and at the same time also determine the feasibility with incorporating them in the retail spaces too. And so we're looking at that, and yes, to Tony's point, that we'll have the public restroom across from the park so that park users can use it.
Great, thank you. Some more comments that have been left behind. Really like how the design has progressed. I support maximizing the number of housing units on this site. Another comment, looks great. I bike by every day and really excited to see this come to life. Thank you. All right, we've got a question for Tony. There is an existing restaurant, the Morris, at Hampshire and Mariposa, but that corner of the building is a complete dead zone for this project. Why is that?
Been to the restaurant. It's a great restaurant. It actually is one of the more active corners of this project. It may not convey itself that great there, but what it is the location where all the buses will be coming into the facility. So really want to make sure the buses have quick and easy movement to get into the facilities. We don't want them to have to be interrupted with too much stuff. So they enter there. Also along Hampshire, we have that lobby and entry point for the staff. So a lot of staff will be picked up, dropped off along Hampshire, and right on that corner of Hampshire and Mariposa, they'll be using that lobby as well as the elevator that goes up there. And just up from that, as you go up Hampshire, there's the second lobby, which is for the housing component that goes to the podium level. So there is a lot of activity that happens on the corner of Hampshire and Mariposa.
Great, thank you. All right, we'll be winding down in the next few minutes and just waiting for the next question. Oh, are we done with questions? Did we capture them all? You know what, while we're confirming the questions, if we go to the next slide, I do want to make sure that those of you that have attended do know how to get in touch with us. You can find out more information about the project at sfmta.com/Potrero Yard. And that webpage is consistently being updated with project information as the project progresses. You can also feel free to reach out to us via email or phone. There's 3 different emails listed on the screen. PotreroYard@sfmta.com will get you straight to SFMTA, as well as PotreroYard@plenarygroup.com, which all those emails will come directly to Potrero Neighborhood Collective, inclusive of the entire team that Chris shared earlier in the meeting, the developer team, as well as the consultant team. And then lastly, Jackie Von Tresco at sfgov.org. If you have a question about public art or some sort of interest around public art, feel free to reach out to her directly. And then you can always give us a call at area code 415-646-2223. That's 646-2223. So as we're wrapping up tonight, we will be collating all the questions that have been received tonight and the responses. If there are any questions that we weren't able to get to, we will certainly include those in the list and post that onto the website so that you can see what that final response is. We do respect and value everyone's time and want to make sure that we are being judicious with your time. So looking forward to staying in touch with you and keeping you updated and continue to receive your input on the project. Thank you so much for attending and have a wonderful evening.